My girlfriend used my savings to impress her friends, so I let her believe she won, then watched her lose everything when the truth hit. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I thought I had found someone I could truly trust. Looking back now, I can see the cracks. But at the time, everything felt perfect, like the universe had finally aligned in my favor. I work long hours at a small tech firm, and I'm meticulous about my finances. Every paycheck is accounted for, every bill scheduled, and I've always prided myself on being responsible. Stability matters to me. Stability meant I could be dependable, not just for myself, but for the people I care about. And at first, Lily seemed like one of those people worth caring for. Lily walked into my life one rainy evening at a friend's party, laughing in a way that made the room feel warmer, the kind of laugh that burrows into your chest. She was stylish, effortlessly put together, with a taste for things I hadn't known I'd find intoxicating until I saw her smile while talking about them. There was ambition in her eyes, a sparkle when she mentioned the friends she hung out with, or the events she attended. At first, it felt inspiring, almost motivating, but now I realize it was a subtle warning. It's a hint of the materialistic streak I barely noticed then. We started dating quickly. I wanted to be generous. I liked making her happy, small surprises, taking her out for dinner, helping with little projects she'd started, even covering a bill or two when she'd had a rough week. I told myself it was normal, that in a healthy relationship, both partners lift each other up. Lily seemed to appreciate it, always thanking me with a warm smile, a gentle touch, or a "you always know how to make me feel special." Still, there were tiny moments that I brushed off. She'd casually comment, "It would be nice to have a fancier apartment someday." Or, "My friends are always amazed at how nice this or that is." Innocent, I thought. Who wouldn't dream a little? It didn't feel like a big deal. I reassured myself that supporting her and indulging these little wishes was just part of love. I trusted her completely, blind to the reality that my generosity might be paving the way for betrayal. I never suspected that the very things I thought were small, harmless desires were the first whispers of a storm I didn't yet know was coming. I thought those little comments about lifestyle were harmless, but soon the pattern became harder to ignore. Lily started asking for bigger favors, small at first, but with a subtle urgency I hadn't noticed before. "Hey, could you cover dinner this weekend?" "My paycheck's late," she'd say, flashing that smile that always disarmed me. Or, "I saw this jacket at the store, it's just amazing. Can we?" I'd nod before even thinking, feeling proud that I could make her happy. It didn't feel like spending, it felt like love. But then came the inconsistencies. She would mention extra money she supposedly had from side jobs or a bonus. Yet I noticed that some weeks she seemed more stressed about her accounts than she admitted. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with a friend, laughing nervously about buying something extravagant that didn't fit her budget. My stomach twisted, but I told myself I was probably overreacting. Maybe she was just stressed. Her friends started creeping into the picture more too. She'd post pictures, talk about nights out, and casually highlight the things they had that she didn't. "You should see Jenna's new bag, it's insane," she said once, nudging me to notice. Or, "All my friends are getting these experiences. It's just, everyone's talking about it." At the time, I thought it was harmless bragging, part of her social life, part of fitting in. But slowly, I began to realize something that made my chest tighten. My savings, carefully built over years, were slowly disappearing. Every time she asked for money, it was framed as borrowing for a little while or just to cover this one thing. I swear, every time I trusted her. I didn't want to see that maybe she wasn't just borrowing. Maybe she was using me to fund a lifestyle I couldn't even fully understand, even as unease crept into my thoughts. I dismissed it. Love, I told myself. Love is about trust. She's stressed. I'll be patient. I'll figure out how to get it back later. But deep down, a small voice whispered that something wasn't right, and that whisper wouldn't leave me alone. And then one evening, that whisper turned into a jolt of suspicion I couldn't ignore. Things started escalating faster than I ever expected. Lily's requests became bolder, no longer just small favors or covering a dinner here and there. She started dropping hints about wanting designer items, expensive dinners, and even trips she couldn't afford herself. "It's just for one weekend. My friends would freak if I didn't go," she said one Friday night, leaning on me with that disarming grin. I felt a pang of guilt at even thinking about saying no. I wanted her to be happy. I wanted to be the guy who made that possible. At first I told myself it was fine. I've always been the type to support the people I care about. But little things started stacking up, hot excuses about why she hadn't deposited money she owed. Fleeting moments when she looked anxious about overspending. Once, I caught her lingering on her phone after a call, whispering, "I hope he doesn't notice." My chest tightened, and I forced myself to smile, telling myself it was probably nothing. Her friend's influence only made things worse. She would post pictures or talk about their adventures, making it sound like she needed to keep up. "Everyone's going to be at this rooftop party. I can't miss it," she said, practically pleading, as if my support was the only thing standing between her and social disaster. That's when the guilt hit me, the thought that if I didn't give her money, she'd feel left out, embarrassed, or inadequate. But behind the smiles, I started noticing the little cracks in her stories. She'd forget details she'd told me just days before, or change the reason she needed money mid-conversation. Yet I dismissed it as forgetfulness, or stress, or maybe she just wasn't as financially savvy as me. I rationalized it. She's human. I love her. I can fix this. Still, a gnawing feeling lingered, a sense that something bigger was happening. Something I couldn't yet see. I could feel the tension building, like static before a storm. And I knew, somewhere deep down, that the money wasn't going to come back the way I imagined it would. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, realizing that the trust I'd built this relationship on might be the very thing putting me in danger. I discovered the truth in the most mundane way. The kind of way that hits you and leaves your stomach in knots. I was going through my online banking one quiet Sunday afternoon's just routine. Checking balances, planning bills, and I noticed something off. A series of withdrawals I didn't remember authorizing. Small ones at first, then larger ones, all tracing back to places I'd never expected. My heart started racing as I pieced it together. Lily had been using my savings, not for emergencies, not for rent or bills, but to impress her friends. To maintain a lifestyle that wasn't hers. I felt sick, a mix of betrayal and self-loathing. How had I not seen it sooner? The receipts, the strange phone calls, the glances at her phone, I had dismissed them all. And now it was undeniable. I remembered a conversation I'd overheard just last week, Lily laughing with her friend. "He'll never suspect a thing. I can get anything I want." That line echoed in my head as if it were a punch to the gut. The worst part was how unaware she seemed. Later that evening, she came in from work humming, with shopping bags dangling from her hands, completely oblivious that I already knew. "Look what I got today. My friends are going to freak. They've never seen anything like it," she said, eyes sparkling, showing me her haul. I smiled, keeping my calm, while inside I was boiling. I couldn't confront her yet. Not now, not before she hit her own breaking point. I wanted her to believe she had one, that she was clever and untouchable. My mind raced, planning silently how this would unfold. I was terrified of losing control, terrified of what my own anger might make me do, but I also felt a strange sense of empowerment, knowing that for the first time, I had the upper hand. The night stretched on, and I watched her flaunt what she didn't truly own, my stomach a tangle of rage and disbelief. It was intoxicating in a way I couldn't explain, seeing someone so confident, so oblivious, while holding the key to their downfall. And in that moment, I realized that letting her continue might be the only way justice would truly reach her. Little did she know, the storm had already begun brewing, and she was walking straight into it. From that moment on, I decided to play along. I pretended everything was normal, laughing at her jokes, complimenting her outfits, even helping her plan outings, like I always had. The difference now was that inside, I was fully aware of what she was doing, and I let her believe she was winning. Every time she asked for money, I handed it over with a smile, while my mind cataloged every purchase, every lavish indulgence, every brag she made to her friends. She grew bolder, her arrogance blossoming like a flower in spring. One evening, she returned from a night out with a group of friends, holding 2 bottles of champagne and a designer clutch. "Look at this. Can you believe Jenna paid half of this?" "I just love having friends who get me," she gushed, practically glowing. I nodded, pretending to be impressed, while inwardly noting the figures. Mentally calculating how much of my savings had gone into propping up this image she so desperately wanted to maintain. The more she flaunted, the more reckless she became. She posted stories online, captioning herself in ways that made it seem like she was living a life far beyond reality. And she made sure I was present for the performance. "Can you take a picture of me?" "I want everyone to see this," she asked, her eyes sparkling with pride. And I did, smiling behind the lens, letting her feel untouchable while quietly holding the truth close to my chest. I remember feeling a strange mix of emotions. Disbelief, but also a creeping satisfaction. Every laugh she gave, every proud boast, was a step closer to the inevitable collapse I knew was coming. I would never let her know that I had all the pieces, that I had been silently documenting the trail of her deception by now. It was clear she believed she could manipulate and control every situation. She thought I was just a fool who loved her too much to notice, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to enjoy the suspense, to savor the moment before the fall, knowing that the higher she climbed, the harder she would crash. Little did Lily know. I wasn't just watching, I was waiting for the perfect moment to let the illusion shatter. By the time we hit the midpoint of our relationship, Lily had reached peak arrogance. She strutted around as if the world revolved around her social circle, flaunting what she thought were victories she'd earned, while completely oblivious that every dollar, every indulgence, every moment of perceived superiority had come from me. One evening, she threw a party at her apartment, expensive cocktails, rented decorations, the whole works. "Everyone's going to be so jealous," she said, practically buzzing with excitement. "I can't believe I pulled this off." I smiled and helped her with the setup, all the while counting the cost in my head, mentally tracing each withdrawal from my savings. Then came the twist, the moment that shifted everything. I discovered that she had gone even further than I imagined. Beyond impressing her friends, she had secretly borrowed additional money from other sources, promising them she'd pay them back with my savings. Suddenly, the illusion of control she had felt so secure in started to wobble. The situation wasn't just reckless, it was catastrophic. Her entire lifestyle, all of the bragging and glamour, rested on a fragile foundation I had been silently keeping afloat. Watching her, unaware of how much she'd overextended herself, was infuriating and intoxicating. She bragged, laughed, and flaunted, convinced that her cleverness had no consequences. "Honestly, can you believe this? They'll never know how much work I put into it," she said, tilting her head, clearly proud of her deception. My chest tightened with a mix of rage and disbelief. How could someone be so blind? So audacious? I decided to let her continue, to let her think she had absolute control. If I confronted her now, it would ruin the build-up, the natural collapse I knew was coming. I wanted her to enjoy every second of false triumph. The suspense was electric. The tension between what she believed and what I knew almost unbearable. And yet, even as I smiled and nodded, a part of me feared how far this could go. How badly would she crash? How deep would the fallout reach? I had never felt such a mix of dread and anticipation. But I knew one thing for certain: the higher she flew, the harder she would fall. After that party, I started to subtly push the situation further, almost like a puppeteer pulling invisible strings. I didn't confront Lily, didn't even give her a hint that I knew the full extent of her spending. Instead, I began planting little nudges that would expose her recklessness naturally. I'd forget to cover a small part of a bill, casually mention a due date she hadn't noticed, or leave receipts lying around in plain sight. Each tiny action was calculated to make her feel just slightly off balance. Like the first cracks in her carefully curated facade, she remained blissfully unaware, growing more arrogant by the day. She'd plan lavish nights out, post pictures of expensive meals, and text me incessantly about how envious her friends were of her. "Can you believe Jenna got that limited edition bag? Everyone's going to freak," she said one evening, practically vibrating with pride. I nodded, smiling, letting her believe she was untouchable, while silently cataloging every indulgence. Every brag, every borrowed or spent dollar. Her friends' influence didn't help. They fawned over her, validated her lifestyle, and encouraged the illusion further. "You're amazing, Lily. How do you even do it?" They'd gush over social media, and she'd beam with confidence. I could feel the tension rising inside me, a mixture of anticipation and unease. She was building a house of cards with every boast, every spend, every carefully staged Instagram post, and I was watching from the sidelines. It was strange, almost intoxicating to see someone so oblivious to the foundation of lies they were standing on. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt satisfaction that she was finally facing the consequences of her arrogance, and guilt for letting it happen instead of confronting her sooner. But I knew it was worth it. She needed to hit her own breaking point for the lesson to truly sink in. By now, the cracks in her life were becoming noticeable to anyone paying attention, and I could sense that it wouldn't be long before the first domino fell. Little did she know, the moment when it all started unraveling was closer than she thought. It didn't take long for the first cracks to appear. Lily's carefully curated world, the one she thought was untouchable, began showing signs of instability. One afternoon, she called me in a panic. "I missed a payment." "I don't know what happened," she said, her voice tight and slightly shaky. Normally, she would have laughed off a small mistake, brushing it away with charm. But this time, there was fear behind her words, a hint of panic that made my stomach clench. I watched silently, pretending to be concerned while keeping my emotions in check. Around her, everything still looked perfect. Her friends didn't suspect a thing. She was still posting, still laughing, still flaunting what she thought were victories. But the tension in her tone, the way she avoided eye contact when mentioning money, told a different story. The illusion was cracking, and she had no idea I had known the whole time. Little by little, her friends started noticing inconsistencies. She would brag about experiences only for someone to later realize they didn't match up with reality. Gossip spread, subtle at first, but enough to make her hesitate before posting. Enough to make her glance nervously at her phone as if waiting for judgment. I could feel her arrogance wavering, and it was a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. She had built herself up, and now the first pieces were starting to fall. Even so, she refused to admit the truth to anyone or herself. Every time she tried to explain away a missed payment or a suspicious withdrawal, she added another layer of lies, digging herself deeper. "It's fine. I just forgot." That's all she'd say, voice tight. Attempting to maintain the image she loved so much, I could see her teetering. Walking on the edge of a cliff she didn't even know was there, and as I observed, I realized the collapse was inevitable. Every laugh she gave, every boast she made, was pushing her closer to the moment when the truth would hit, and there would be no one to catch her. It all came crashing down one evening in a way I never could have fully prepared for, though I'd known it was coming. Lily hit rock bottom. She had overextended herself so completely that every social advantage, every moment of bragging, unraveled at once. I remember the night vividly, the apartment. Normally full of laughter and clinking glasses, it's quiet except for the sharp ring of overdue notices and the muffled sounds of her frantic calls. "I don't understand. How could this happen?" she whispered, voice cracking, pacing like a trapped animal. I stood in the doorway, silent, watching her unravel. Her friends, the very people she had spent so much to impress, were no longer impressed. Messages went unanswered. Invites stopped coming, and the subtle whispers of gossip grew louder. She tried to put on her usual charm, laughing nervously, but the cracks in her confidence were impossible to hide. "It's just bad luck. It'll be fine," she mumbled, more to herself than to anyone else. Her entire image, the one she had worked so hard to build with my money, was collapsing around her. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to run in and fix it all, to take her hand and tell her it would be okay. But another part of me, the part that had been silently cataloging every lie, every indulgence, every carefully staged post, reveled in the justice of it. She had spent months thinking she was untouchable. Now she was completely exposed. The rock-bottom moment wasn't just financial light, it was emotional. The pride, the arrogance, the sense of invincibility she carried everywhere was gone. She looked at me then, eyes wide, searching, desperate, and I realized she had finally understood she had no control left. And in that instant, I knew the next step, the confrontation, the reveal was coming. But before I could say anything, she froze, staring at a message on her phone. Her face went pale, and I saw it, the final domino about to fall. What she saw made her gasp, and the room felt heavier, as if the air itself was waiting for her next move. I finally decided it was time, the moment I'd been waiting for. The confrontation that would bring everything into the open. Lily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her hands trembling slightly, eyes darting back and forth. I took a deep breath and walked over, trying to keep my voice calm, almost casual. "Lily, we need to talk," I said. And she looked up, confusion flashing across her face. "What about?" she asked, trying to sound innocent, but there was a flicker of panic in her eyes. I placed the statements, receipts, and transaction history I had quietly collected over months on the coffee table between us. Every purchase she had made, every withdrawal from my savings, every lie about borrowed money, it was all there, undeniable, impossible to argue with. Her face went pale as she skimmed the documents. I can explain," she stammered, her voice cracking. "What?" But I didn't let her off the hook. "You don't need to explain," I said softly, but firmly. "I already know. I know how you used my savings to impress your friends, how you lied to me, how you thought you could get away with it." I watched as the color drained from her face, her hand shaking as she clutched at the papers. The realization hit her hard. Her carefully constructed world, the one she thought was untouchable, was completely exposed. No longer see her as flawless, and her pride, the thing she had valued above all else, was shattered. She tried to justify it, tried to shift blame. But every word she uttered only confirmed what I already knew. I set my boundaries clearly, my voice steady. "This ends here. Our relationship is over, but the trust is gone, and nothing will fix it." For a moment, she just stared at me, mouth open, speechless. The silence in the room was heavy, almost suffocating, and as she finally broke down, sobbing quietly, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The confrontation had come, the truth had hit, and everything was finally out in the open. But even in that moment, I knew the aftermath, what came next, would define both of us forever. After the confrontation, the aftermath settled in like a heavy fog. Lily's world, the one she had built so meticulously on borrowed money and borrowed trust, was gone. Her friends, the very people she had tried to impress, slowly distanced themselves once the truth came out. Messages went unanswered, invitations stopped arriving, and whispers turned into judgment. She looked around her apartment one evening, surrounded by the remnants of a lifestyle she could no longer sustain, and I saw the first real glimmers of regret in her eyes. I, on the other hand, had a lot to process. Recovering the savings she had used wasn't easy, but more importantly, I had to rebuild my own sense of trust, both in others and in myself. I reflected on all the small red flags I had ignored, all the moments I rationalized away because I loved her. How could I have been so blind? I found myself asking repeatedly, but I also realized that this experience, as painful as it had been, had given me clarity. Lily tried to reconcile, pleading through texts and phone calls, but I didn't respond. There was nothing to satrust once. It's broken in such a fundamental way isn't something you can repair with words or apologies. I had learned that lesson painfully, but thoroughly. Even when she showed up at my apartment one afternoon, looking desperate and disheveled, I calmly closed the door, leaving her outside alone with the consequences of her choices. The emotional payoff was heavy, but satisfying. I was finally free from manipulation, from deception, and from the constant anxiety of wondering how far her lies would reach. I had taken back control of my life, my finances, and my dignity. And yet, there was a subtle, almost ironic satisfaction in knowing that the very social circle she had tried so hard to impress now bore witness to her fall. The humiliation, the isolation, the loss she had created it herself, brick by brick. And as I walked away from the mess she had made, I felt a quiet sense of empowerment. Little did she know, it's the hardest part of her journey, realizing she had no one left to lean on, was only just beginning. By the time the dust settled, I felt like a completely different person. I had reclaimed my life, my savings, and, most importantly, my sense of self-respect. Lily's world, once so dazzling and untouchable in her eyes, had crumbled entirely. Her friends had turned away, her social influence evaporated, and the financial consequences she ignored for so long were now hers alone to bear. I didn't gloat, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing justice quiet. Inevitable, an entirely self-inflicted play out before me. I moved forward carefully, wiser and more guarded. I learned to spot the subtle signs of manipulation. In materialism, lessons I paid for in sleepless nights and anxious days, I invested more in myself, emotionally, financially, and socially. For the first time in years, I felt empowered to set boundaries without fear of being seen as selfish. My trust, once so freely given, became something sacred, not disposable. Lily, on the other hand, continued to spiral quietly. Rumors reached me occasionally failed attempts to rebuild her social life. Financial struggles, the kind of small but cutting consequences that left her humbled and isolated. There was a bitter poetry in watching someone who once thought they were untouchable grapple with the real world on their own terms. It wasn't revenge I sought, it was justice, and life had provided it in a way that felt both natural and inevitable. And though the relationship was over, the lessons lingered. I had been naive, yes, but I had also been courageous in my patience and restraint. I let the situation unfold, let the truth emerge at its own pace, and in doing so, I found strength I hadn't realized I possessed. The scars remained, but they were badges of experience. Reminders that I would never again allow someone else's deception to control my life. Looking back now, I realized the most important victory wasn't financial, it was emotional. I walked away with clarity, self-respect, and a renewed sense of who I was. And as for Lily, she may have thought she won once, but in the end, the truth always has a way of catching up, and I was there to witness it, unshaken, empowered, and free.